There's a lot of rumors floating around the internet and in the news media.
This is big. We are sitting down with one of the criminal defense attorneys of Sean Diddy Combs as the convicted rap mogul awaits sentencing in federal court and a decision on whether he'll actually be released from jail before sentencing. Oh, and by the way, there's also talk that he may get a pardon from the president. Yeah, all this going on. I get the chance to actually discuss what has been happening behind the scenes.
The courtroom was suffocating with tension. Every seat filled, every reporter hunched over their notepad. Every camera waiting to capture the moment that would mark the downfall of one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop history. Diddy sat at the defense table, his once confident demeanor stripped away.
Okay, we're about to do something that we've never done here on Sidebar. For a show that has covered every aspect of Sean Diddy Combs' criminal case, we are about to speak with one of his defense attorneys, Alexandra Shapiro. She is part of his legal team at trial. And the trial, by the way, that ended with Combs acquitted of the most serious charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking. He was convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. They call these the Mann Act violations, moving women and men across state lines for the purposes of commercial sex work. Now, we have talked about Alexandra Shapiro before. She was the attorney, for example, who argued for admitting that video of rape accuser Mia wishing Combs a happy birthday after the alleged assault. She played a key role in this case. And with questions about could Combs' convictions be thrown out, what could he be sentenced to, will he make bail before he's sentenced, can he get a presidential pardon, this feels like a great opportunity to get some insight into all this and certain aspects of the trial, like why didn't they call Christina Coram? All right, so let me get right into it. I am joined right now by Alexandra Shapiro herself. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here on Sidebar. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I have a lot of things I want to get into. We will talk about all the latest developments. But first of all, I got to ask, what was it like to be part of a team like this one? Because you know, every argument, every question, it is going to be focused, debated on a national, maybe an international stage. This is a major case. And also, by the way, you were representing somebody and are representing somebody who for the past 2 years has taken quite a hit in the media and wasn't the most popular figure in the last 2 years. So to be representing Sean Combs in this massive trial, what was it like for you?
I mean, it was actually an amazing experience. First of all, the team was fantastic. I mean, I've never worked with so many great lawyers with different talents meshing together. And it was great after I've been working on this case since last September, dealing with the client being just bashed in the media, bashed by a ton of frivolous civil lawsuits that just sort of whipped up the hysteria against him. It was great to finally be able to help him have his day in court. And so the actual witnesses could be heard, and we had a chance to really expose a lot of the truth of what was really behind all of this.
Obviously, this is a win, right? He was acquitted of the most serious charges that he was facing. Did there ever become a time, though, during the course of the trial, maybe in the first several weeks, when you're like, I'm a little nervous, I think he may get convicted of racketeering or sex trafficking, or you were confident throughout the prosecution's case that they just weren't reaching their burden?
Well, we felt good about the trial most of the time and we're confident, but you never can be too confident in a federal criminal trial. I mean, especially in the Southern District of New York, the government almost always wins, and it's a huge challenge and really, really difficult to win. So we were always concerned.
His eyes darting back and forth as though searching for an exit that didn't exist. For years, he had been larger than life, the kind of man who seemed to bend reality itself with fame, money, and power. But here, inside these 4 walls, none of that mattered. He wasn't a mogul. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't untouchable. He was simply a man about to hear his fate. The judge shuffled papers, adjusted glasses, and looked down from the bench with the kind of authority that even Diddy couldn't stare down. The charges had been recited for weeks. The testimony stacked up like bricks in a wall, each one heavier than the last. Every witness, every piece of evidence, every damning detail had chipped away at the myth of invincibility Diddy once wrapped himself in. The time for arguments was over. This was sentencing. This was the moment where speculation ended, where the gossip became irrelevant, and where the gavel of justice would finally fall. The silence was unbearable. It wasn't the kind of silence that brings calm. It was the kind that makes your skin crawl. that presses on your chest until breathing.
To the judge overseeing this case, Judge Arun Subramanian. Remember, this comes after a jury of Combs' peers found him not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, not guilty of 2 counts of sex trafficking, but they did convict him of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. He's set to be sentenced on October 3rd. Technically, he could face up to 10 years in prison on each charge. Highly unlikely. Think maybe you might be looking at somewhere to 2 to 5 years potentially. But he could also get time served and be released, although that also seems unlikely. I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But initially, after the verdict, right after the verdict, his defense team petitioned the court that he should be released. He was just acquitted of some very serious charges. The judge denied it. The judge denied Combs bail once again. And remember, this comes after he was rejected bail multiple times since he was arrested back in September of 2024, highlighting the severity of the charges, the violence, and so forth. But now, this is different. Now, what is the defense arguing? I'm going to go over all this in the new letter. I'm going to give my take at the end about whether or not it's going to be successful and whether or not he will actually be released before sentencing in October. So, the defense begins by arguing that Sean Combs should be released in advance of sentencing, and the court has the power to do this. They have the authority, among other things, because you can clearly show, quote, that there are exceptional reasons why such person's detention would not be appropriate. So, what are those exceptions? What are those reasons? What are those circumstances that are exceptional? They highlight several things that we're going to get into. That the charges he was convicted of, we're going to call them the Mann Act violations. That's what it's called under the law. They're not as severe, they're not as egregious as other convictions in other cases. That the sheer fact that he's locked up at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, for the past 11 months, that in and of itself is a reason for him to be released. These are all exceptional circumstances, and I'm going to get into all the arguments. But first, they highlight the standard, and they argue that to be released under federal law, you need to show 2 conditions. First, the district court must find by clear and convincing evidence that the person is not likely to flee or pose a danger to the safety of any other person or the community if released. Second, it must be clearly shown that there are exceptional reasons why such person's detention would not be appropriate. Now, clear and convincing evidence is a lower standard, by the way. It's not like beyond a reasonable doubt. Anyway, basically, you have to show he's not a flight risk, he's not a danger, and you have to show there are particular, exceptional, unique reasons for why detaining Combs is wrong. We're going to start with the exceptional reasons justifying his release. And they begin by trying to define, well, what exactly is exceptional circumstances? What does that mean? And they argue that case law suggests a court has a lot of discretion to determine whether a particular set of circumstances qualifies as exceptions. And they say, look, Sean Combs, his case, so different from other ones. There has never been, according to them, a Mann Act prosecution like this one before. And this is how they lay it out. Quote, there has literally never been a case like this one, where a person and his girlfriend arrange for adult men to have consensual sexual relations with the adult long-term girlfriend as part of a demonstrated swingers lifestyle and has been prosecuted and incarcerated under the Mann Act. Combs and 2 of his longtime girlfriends had a private, intimate life that is not uncommon today. They're talking about Jane and Cassie Ventura. Quote, it may not have been common on June 25th, 1910, when the Mann Act, or as it was originally called, the White Slave Traffic Act, was passed, but attitudes about sex and morality have come a long way in the last 115 years. It is worth noting that when the Mann Act was passed to protect the morals and decency of America's women were not allowed to vote. As noted below, perhaps due to the troubling background of this statute, whose history is rich with both racism and misogyny, the Department of Justice has limited its application to those.
Feels like a struggle. Even the air seemed thicker, heavier, as if the weight of the verdict was already filling the room before the words were even spoken. When the judge began to speak, the words carried with them an edge so sharp it felt like the entire room flinched. The sentence was not light, not merciful, not designed to allow Diddy to fade quietly into the background. No, this was long. This was brutal. This was the kind of sentence meant to make an example, meant to show that no amount of fame or fortune could shield a man from the consequences of his actions. As each year was announced, piling one on top of the other, it was as though every syllable cut deeper into Diddy's armor, tearing away at the image he had built for decades. And then it happened. The mask cracked, the composure shattered. The mogul, who had always carried himself like a man in control of every situation, suddenly erupted. He slammed his hands against the defense table, his voice breaking through the courtroom with a rawness nobody expected. He shouted, protested, pleaded, demanded to be heard. His words,
evidence that came out during the course of the trial, wouldn't it be difficult for the president to justify maybe pardoning Diddy? Maybe it is a commutation. Maybe it is, if he gets 5 years, he says, okay, I'm commuting it down to 2 or 2.5. I don't know how it would work, but that's the part that I think people might be struggling with, and what you heard, I think, from Megyn Kelly.
And even his own lawyers, no one was coming out here saying that Sean Combs is an angel, that Sean Combs doesn't do anything that is off the wall, crazy. These things, no one is claiming that. And in fact, even during my interviews, when I was saying things that weren't so popular, saying like, listen, he's only going to get convicted of these Mann Acts. I don't think he's going to get convicted of anything. And people were attacking me and saying like, oh, you like, abusers. That's not the point here. The point is to look at the law, apply the law fairly, apply the facts to the law. That's what's important here. And that's what I was doing when I was looking at the case. Looking at this from that standpoint, he's going to have been in for about 15 or 16 months by the time he gets sentenced. It's not like he got a freebie. If he got a misdemeanor battery, he would have served 364 days in jail. If he got a couple charges, maybe he would have served 2 years in jail. If this judge decides to give him 4 or 5 years based on this, do I think that's unfair? Yes. Do I think President Trump would look at that and say this needs to be communed to time served or communed down to 18 months because he is 15 months in? I think so. I think that would be the fair thing to do. Whether or not he does it, I have no idea. I mean, I don't think President Trump does things because it's popular and unpopular all the time. People seem to think that a lot of people in politics do things that the masses are like, oh, this is unpopular or this is popular. President Trump does what he is the right thing to do. And if he feels this is the right thing to do, I think that he would then do it. That's my opinion. I don't think he's looking.
That's an explanation.
At,
that's an explanation. No, that's at least an explanation, because a lot of people would say, I don't know what he has to gain by doing this. But by you saying, if he just, hey, I don't care where it puts me politically, but if I think it's the right thing, if I think there's an injustice, then I'm going to do it. I mean, look, he has pardoned other celebrities, not just Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, but Todd and Julie Chrisley, right? Rapper NBA Youngboy. Is there something about the celebrity aspect that might be influencing his decision?
Well, I don't know if it's the celebrity aspect or that those individuals, some of those individuals he knew, he knew them or he had entered with them. So he knows more about those individuals than just some president. Don't forget, this is part of pop culture. This president was famous before he was president. He wasn't a senator. He wasn't some sort of political guy. He was famous because he associated with a lot of individuals that he now sees get charged with crimes. He was charged with a crime that he felt was unfair, that it was unfair. Other people felt it was unfairly applied. When you look at those instances, all those things that combine, and he understands that people get charged simply because who they are, I think this gives him a unique look into the criminal justice system that generally 99% of the presidents that have come before him do not have. That is the key here. The key is he has been in the shoes of other defendants.
Do you think that this is affected by Maureen Comey, right? She was the lead prosecutor in Diddy's case. We know her father, James Comey, former FBI director, Donald Trump, no love lost there. She was fired from the SDNY after the Diddy verdict. And in a statement, she said, fear is the tool of a tyrant wielded to suppress independent thought. Make of that what you will. Not sure what's going on. But do you think the president could be motivated to provide Diddy some sort of relief because he was prosecuted by Maureen Comey?
Tumbling out, not like those of a business tycoon, but like a man cornered, desperate, terrified of what awaited him. Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled frantically. The guards tensed, stepping closer, ready to restrain him if his outburst went too far. The judge's expression didn't waver, didn't soften, didn't change. The sentence had been handed down, and nothing he could say would change it. His fury, his disbelief, his desperation, none of it mattered. For the first time in his life, his words carried no weight. His influence had no reach. His power had evaporated. This wasn't the Diddy the world remembered. The man who threw lavish parties that lasted until dawn. The man whose name was synonymous with success, excess, and untouchable celebrity. This was a man broken in front of everyone, stripped of the image, stripped of the control, left with nothing but the harsh reality that he would spend years, perhaps decades, behind cold, unforgiving prison walls. The outburst was more than anger, it was fear. Fear of losing the world he had built, brick by brick, deal by deal, song by song. Fear of nights spent not in mansions surrounded by luxury, but in a concrete cell. Fear of being remembered.
Private security. It was an interesting argument because who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in his similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now, the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought in our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, and we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to really be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again, even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And, I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at MDC where he is. So, we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package.
Would it require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be, I know he wanted to go back to his property in Miami, Florida. And there's also an interesting question, I think, that his defense put forward. He just got his life back. That's what they said. He wasn't convicted of the top charges. He was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, but he would be a fool to try to violate any of those conditions when potentially he may get a rather lenient sentence compared to what he was facing. So 2 questions there. Do you think that it would require him to be in New York as opposed to Florida? And do you think that he'd really be in a position to violate the conditions?
First question is, I can't determine what a judge is thinking. I don't think, and this is my opinion, that the judge would let him out of the jurisdiction. I don't know. We can do private security down in Miami. We could also do private security in California, as we did with Sam Bankman-Fried.
Not as a visionary, not as a mogul, but as a cautionary tale. A man who thought he could outrun the truth, but found himself cornered by it in the end. Every second of the breakdown told a story. The shaking hands, the raised voice, the wild eyes, all of it painted the picture of a man who could not fathom the reality before him. He wasn't negotiating record deals or launching brands anymore. He wasn't commanding attention at an awards show. He was begging, lashing out, unraveling in front of strangers, his empire collapsing in real time. And yet, despite the chaos, the sentence stood firm. It was final. The guards moved in, placing their hands on his shoulders, their presence a reminder that his time of dictating the rules was over. He had no control here. The courtroom was not his stage. The judge was not an audience to be swayed. This was justice, and it had no interest in his protests. The reaction outside the courtroom was immediate and explosive. Social media lit up with commentary, shock, and disbelief. Fans who once idolized him expressed heartbreak, while critics said this moment was long overdue. Industry insiders whispered about the ripple effect this would have on the empire he built, the business, the partnerships, the legacy. What does an empire look like when its king is dethroned in such a public, devastating way?
His sentence, maybe the judge might sentence him to lesser time because he's working on himself.
But Jamie, you know what the complication here is that he's been found not guilty on the charges that relate to drug use and domestic violence. That there was no conviction using force, fraud, or coercion in these three ways, and drugs. The Cassie video was off the table. The only thing he's been convicted of is taking a prostitute across state lines for the purpose of prostitution.
But can't the judge consider all of the testimony in the that was presented at the trial?
But the defense is going to say he was found not guilty on those things. So it's really kind of an interesting.
There's that, but there's another side of this. And Jamie, you've been working on this story for 5 days now to lock this down. But what was there was one key word, one of the sources you spoke to. You remember what that word was?
Yeah, redemption.
Yeah, because that's the other part of this. Yeah. That this is Diddy looking at my life after prison. Because now that he knows he's not going to be locked away for decades, not going to be locked away for the rest of his life.
He could get out this year with time served.
Wants to be able to do business. And in order to do that, for people to work with him, even in the entertainment field, he's got to show that he is changing or he's addressing the things that everyone saw come out in this trial. Right. So this is about, part of this is also about what is my life after prison and how can I still be a successful businessman?
And it's interesting because we've talked about this before, that lawyers who represent people in positions like Diddy now, they have two responsibilities. Get them acquitted if you can, and what is their life going to look like after they get out?
Right.
And so there are two components, and this kind of serves
both of those.
Both of those, yeah.
Hi, my name is Alicia, and I am from New Jersey. And I actually think it's a positive thing that Diddy is taking this step towards redemption and going to therapy. And I really feel that everybody is worthy of that, but he really has to show it. And I hope that he is taking this seriously because I think the public is having a hard time processing and really believing that he's really going to change in probably this short amount of time. So I really hope that he says what he's going to do. And I think that the rest of the public can agree that it's going to be difficult trying to understand what accountability and redemption look like in this case.
Yeah. Well, we will see.
Yes,
but
it's going to be very complicated.
Again, it's possible he's going to get out by Thanksgiving.
I don't know. I've heard you say that. I gotta disagree. There's just.
Well, I'll tell you why. If he gets a year, which is possible, he will have served close to a year. Plus, he gets certain credits. So it's. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it's possible.
The judge
is going to give.
For years, Diddy had been a symbol of success, of power, of someone who seemingly lived above the law. But the long and brutal sentence delivered in that courtroom shattered that illusion. It proved that even the most powerful figures could fall. Even the most carefully crafted legacies could crumble. Fame had bought him time. Influence had shielded him from scrutiny. But in the end, neither could save him from the gavel. When the judge finally spoke, the words cut sharper than any headline, more brutal than any rumor. The sentence was long. The sentence was unforgiving. The sentence was the kind that strips away hope, the kind that shatters any illusion of escape. And the moment those words hit the air, Diddy lost control. This wasn't the cool, calculated figure the public once saw in glossy interviews and magazine covers. This wasn't the man who stood above the industry like a giant. This was a man broken, stunned, and furious. He slammed his hands against the table, his voice shaking, demanding answers, pleading, shouting that this couldn't be happening. The courtroom gasped. The guards moved closer. The judge held firm. There was no going back because this wasn't a performance. This was reality. Years of scandal, years of accusations, years of whispers about a darker side hidden beneath the glitz and glamour had all converged to this moment. And the justice system had made its decision. No deals, no shortcuts, no last-minute escapes. Just a brutal prison sentence that would take away the power, the freedom, and the empire Diddy once controlled. Diddy's life as he knew it was over. The courtroom had witnessed the collapse. The world had heard the sentence. And the man who once seemed untouchable now faced the cold, brutal truth of a prison cell. His control was gone, his empire shattered, and his legacy forever changed. As he was led away, still shouting, still protesting, still fighting against the reality closing in on him, the room remained frozen in shock. People knew this day would come, but nobody expected it to play out with such rawness, such emotion, such complete loss of control. The mighty had fallen, and everyone had witnessed it. This wasn't just a sentence. It wasn't just another celebrity scandal. It was the final collapse of a man who built an empire on the image of control, only to lose it all in the one place where control doesn't matter, the courtroom. Diddy's story was rewritten that day, not as the tale of an untouchable mogul, not as the rags-to-riches icon who dominated music and business, but as a man whose power ended where the judge's words began. His long and brutal prison sentence wasn't just the end of his freedom, it was the end of an era, and no amount of shouting could change that.